All right. I've seen the timelines. I know how it goes down. When it comes to social media, it's all one big argument. That's all it is. It was just existed to be one big place for y'all to yell at each other. And one of the biggest arguments in the world of hip hop is the album I love, cherish and adore, is it a classic? Well, you came to the right place, players, because I'm going to be your dude because today I'm going to tell you if that album you love is a classic or if it's not. Let's get it. What up, players? Thank you for joining me yet again for another edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions here on YouTube. You know how we do it. And today, like I said earlier in our little intro, we are talking about hip hop classic albums. So what I've done is I've asked my fam and friends across the social media landscape to submit albums that they wanted me to discuss and determine whether it's a classic or y'all just been hyping it up for too many years. And you know, it's a bunch of those. So this is what I've done. Shout out to the Red Hood. This is my Red Hood helmet. And I have dropped the names of all of those albums that y'all submitted under the Red Hood. You see what I did there? Somebody gonna get that reference. But anyway, they are in the Red Hood helmet. And I will be determining which albums we're going to be discussing by picking them out of the brains of our boy Jason Todd. That's how we roll. Kind of creepy, but that's what's up. So, anyway, before we get started, you know what I got to do. I got to be like every other YouTuber in the world and beg for likes. So, if you're watching this and you haven't already, hit that like button on there. Just right there. Just hit it real quick. It takes a second. Hit that like button. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button so you can show your boy a little bit of love. And make sure you share this video as well with your favorite hip hop heads, because I know y'all gonna have a lot to fuss and debate when it comes to this. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about what an actual classic album is, because in 2022, y'all have just diluted the term. You think any album I like is a classic. No, that's an album you like. It's not a classic. You think any album that's hyped on social media is a classic. No, that's an album that's hyped on social media. It's not a classic. You think any album that you haven't heard from your favorite artist has to be a classic because they wouldn't be a legend without it. Make sure you listen to the album player before you start determining the classic. Y'all say that peanut butter and jelly sandwich I had for lunch, it's a classic. No, it was just a sandwich. It was probably a classic when you were in the 3rd grade, but we off of that right now. So anyway, let's talk about what determines a classic. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, that's why you're watching this video clearly to get it, there are 3 determining factors about what determines what a classic album is. Number 1, album has to have superior quality. Keep in mind, especially later in this list, I did not say the album has to be perfect. There is no perfect album. I'm sorry, Stillmatic ain't perfect. Thriller ain't perfect. Off the Wall ain't perfect. There are little things that could be done to help the album. And that doesn't mean that it isn't powerful or impactful or influential. So it doesn't have to be perfect to be a classic. Number 2, it has to have a significant impact on that artist's career. So what do I mean by that? It has to be an album that was a turning point for that artist. If an artist dropped an album and you loved it, but it had really no factor on his or her career going up or down, left or right, it's probably not a classic. It's an album that might be good in their discography, but if it didn't do anything to put them on or to take them to a new level or change their trajectory in some way, probably ain't classic player. And then thirdly, going along what we discussed, the third and most important thing, because this is the thing that Twitter gets wrong each and every time. A classic album has to have, y'all listening? It has to have a legacy. What do I mean by legacy? I'm going to boil it down to one word for y'all in the house. It has to influence the game in some way, shape, or form. That is the reason why when an album drops on a Friday and by 2:15 p.m. y'all are calling it a classic, I have deleted you from my timeline. Because an album has to have time to affect the culture itself. Think of those albums I talked about earlier, Off the Wall, Thriller, Stillmatic. Those are albums that, of course, undisputed classics. But over the years, there have been so many albums they've influenced, so many artists they've influenced, so many just parts of the industry that have been influenced by what was presented. If an album hasn't influenced anybody, I'm sorry, it ain't a classic. And you can't determine influence when it's been out for 20 minutes. So you have to keep those three factors in mind. Is the album great? How did it affect the artist's career? And how did it affect the game overall? If you can give a check to all three of those, we probably talking a classic. If you can't, sorry for your fave. So, anyway, before one more thing that I want to note, because this comes up all the time and it becomes really debated, and I'm sure it'll come up on this list as well. Y'all know me and my 5-star ratings. They're very rare. When I give it, that means the album is of superior quality. But there have been some pushbacks because there are some albums that I have said are classics that I didn't give 5 stars to. There are some albums I gave 5 stars that I said weren't classic. And a lot of people hit me up and like, you gave an album 5 stars, that album isn't a classic. I know. Because in my eyes, and this is just me, this is just your boy, when it comes to album rankings, whether you rate them by 5 stars or out of 10 or out of mics or out of sheep emojis, I don't care. The point is those are determined by album quality. Remember, that's just one of the 3 factors we're talking about. So a 5-star review is about quality, not about legacy, not about influence. Those cannot be determined, in my opinion, by a star rating. So yeah, people are like, you shouldn't give out 5 stars if it's not a classic. Well, think about that, player. If that's the case, that means I could never give any album 5 stars. Take, for example, earlier this year, I gave my first 5-star review in a very long time. Kendrick Lamar's Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers. Gave that 5 stars because it was determined by quality. Now, if I was like, well, I can't give it 5 stars until I know it's a classic, that means I could never give any album 5 stars until like a year later and then retroactively go and change the review. That feels disingenuous. That feels cheap. Again, you do what you want. You can give everything 5 stars. I probably won't read your stuff if you do, but it's your ranking, it's your review, you can do what you want. But as for me in my house, if I give something 5 stars, that's quality, not necessarily classic status. I bring that up because I'm sure that's going to come up on the list, and I'm sure somebody's going to yell at me in the comments, so do what you do. Now that all of that is out of the way, let's get started and see what's good in the old red hood. And the first album we got, producer D Roth, is this one of yours? First one up, Watch the Throne, Kanye and Jay-Z. Alright, cool. So Watch the Throne. This is an album that's just absolutely beloved, of course, by not just Jay-Z fans, but especially the Kanye clan. Because this album came out as a collaboration that was between 2 heavyweights right at kind of Kanye's peak for that generation, the early 2010s. I've talked before about that generation of hip-hop fans that came on in that early 2010s, as if that have influenced the past decade. They love Kanye and they love this album because it was just up there. It was like the mega powers. It was just like the 2 titans of the game up at the top, and we get them on one album. Big, big moment. So, of course, it comes with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of love from that generation, especially those who love Kanye. Speaking of Kanye, Speaking of, aside, real quick aside, have y'all seen this helmet thing that he's selling y'all? It looks like someone just like took a blob of bird poop and slapped it on their head. And I'm sure Kanye is selling this thing for like $500. Who is going out in public wearing this thing? Y'all would not wear a mask for COVID and screamed about your freedoms, but now you're gonna wear a fossilized velociraptor skull on your head? Player, get out of my face. Anyway, I was talking about classic albums, not horrible fashion. So anyway, we're back to it. Watch the Throne. Is it a classic? No. Look, it's a good album for sure. I like the album as much as everybody else. But we got to remember the factors that we're talking about here. And if you take this album out of the hip-hop spectrum, does it really change the game? Not really. It's a good album. If you remove it from Jay-Z or Kanye's discography, will it be a major omission? No, not really. It was a fun side project that worked very, very well. It gave us some very big songs, but I don't think overall it affected the aura of hip-hop itself. Good album. Wouldn't call it a classic, though. I know y'all are already mad, so let's see what old Jason Todd got for us next. This is a crazy one. I don't know if I've talked about this album. Mase, Harlem World. Oh, Mase, the original mumble rapper. So for those who don't know, 1997, Bad Boy was at the top of their creative peak. And with the departure of the Notorious B.I.G., Mase became Puff's biggest rap star. And he was absolutely everywhere. You could not escape these songs. And his debut, Harlem World, was a big deal. It moved units. You know how it is. It moved a lot of units. However, even though it was a big notoriety for hip hop, well, for Bad Boy in that case, and I'll get to that in a second, is it a classic? Nope. Not to me, players, it ain't a classic. I'll tell you why. Because, first of all, in terms of quality, the album is just okay. Take them nostalgia goggles off and go listen to it today. The album just alright. It's not that great. Besides it having a few bangers on it, 24 Hours to Live, that joint goes hard. Other than that, it's just alright. It's an okay album from an okay artist that came at a time where he was super duper hot. And look, I was a fan. I'm still pissed to this day because my brother took my album and lost it. And it's been like 20 years, 25 years, and I can't find the album. So I'm pretty annoyed by that. But a classic? Sorry, players. This ain't one. Let's see if we actually got a real classic in here, because you're 0 for 2 right now. All right, Juvie, 400 Degreez. I remember when this album dropped. I think it was 98 when I first heard Ha, 98, 99. I was on college campus. And this song just blew me away because this dude, Juvie, he sounded like one of my uncles talking real fast. It's just like, but it was something that there was an artistry behind it. It wasn't just a dude making weird noises or just being goofy for clout. He was actually representing his region, but he was doing it in an artistic way. He's a very underrated lyricist, in my opinion, and this album is full of hits. But is it a classic? This is a tough one, but I'm going to say yes. Yes, I've gone back and forth on this one on social media for years. People have been shooting darts my way, but I'm going to go on record and say yes after listening to it recently. Here's why. It checks the boxes. Is it a great album? Absolutely. Was it a turning point for Juvie's career? Absolutely. It was also a turning point for Cash Money, for Mannie Fresh. This album really helped cement that Southern dominance that happened at that time. So again, with that Southern dominance changing the course of hip hop itself, that's our third check. Its legacy. It was an influential album. Is it a perfect album? No. Is it a great album? Yes. Was it an influential album? For sure. To me, I think that for sure makes it a classic. It's for sure a Southern classic. But if we want to go ahead and make it broad, I think that it's safe to say 400 Degreez, I'll call it a classic. My video, I'm calling it a classic, player. Be mad if you want to. Let's see what we got up next. Hold on, y'all. Gotta open this thing with one hand. Oh, man, this is gonna be tough on my heart. I gotta keep my biases aside. Lupe Fiasco's Food and Liquor. Man, look, the way y'all go crazy over Kendrick Lamar, in my opinion, that should be Lupe's spot. Because in the mid-2000s, Lupe was doing Kendrick before Kendrick would do Kendrick 5 and 10 years later. Incredible lyricist, incredible storyteller, incredible at the way that he's able to take cultural themes and tie them into the music artistically. He really did it at a level where hip-hop was kind of not necessarily losing its way, but that type of hip-hop at that level was becoming more rare. So Lupe was a breath of fresh air. And in my opinion, this album is his best album. I know some people say The Cool. I think this is the one. I personally gave this one 5 stars, but is it a classic? I have to be unbiased. I might have to say no. It makes me sad. Here's why. Is it of a great quality? Absolutely. Absolutely one of the best albums, in my opinion, of the 2000s. But let's look at legacy. Has it really impacted the game of hip-hop as it should have? I don't think it has. It's well remembered. It's well celebrated in some spots. And I'm sure somebody gonna send me a link where some random rapper was like, this album made me want to become a rapper. That's great. I hope you were good as Lupe at your game. There better not be some whack rapper talking about that they weren't inspired by this, because you need to go back and study. But it didn't affect hip-hop overall as I feel like it should have. And that ain't on Lupe. That's probably on y'all, because y'all probably didn't listen to the album. But it's not on Lupe. It's not his fault. He did his part. But I just can't say that its influence on hip-hop overall is strong enough to label it a classic. It's his best album. It's his, I don't even know if it's his most defining album. I might say it is, because we kind of see Lupe as that skater kid, and this is the album that did it. Love this album so much, but I must be the unbiased album reviewer that you know and hate. Sorry, Lupe. Gotta keep it real. I don't think it's a classic. After that depressing take, let's see what we got next. Oh, this is an interesting one. Nas Magic. So as most of y'all know, Nas has been on this incredible streak right now. And this album came out at the end of last year, 2021. It snuck in December. And if you want to be real, I've been thinking about cheating and putting it on my best albums of 2022 list. And if I do, it's going to be number 2 on the list, right behind the Kendrick album. It's that great. It's a great album. But it's a pretty new album. So I must ask the question, is it a classic? Nope. At least not yet. Look, it's still too new. Remember what I said earlier. This album is maybe 8 months old at this point. Because of that, I feel like it's too soon to weigh it. It's definitely not a classic in terms of Nas's other legit classics. And it hasn't been around enough for us to really say if it has affected Nas's career. It has helped solidify his career. But has it taken it to another direction? Has it influenced the game? Do we have a lot of Nas Magic babies running around? A lot of artists who have taken that sound and style and doing something with it? I love the album, but I cannot say right now that it's classic. It's just too soon, y'all. And that's why when I tell y'all, if you see someone calling something a classic, an album been out 15 minutes, please learn where the block button is on your social media platform of choice. Erase them from your life. Anyway, let's see who we got next. I gotta shake these up better. There's another Nas album, Stillmatic. So Stillmatic is the ultimate comeback album. For those who don't remember the story, because it's a well-told one, I'll tell it one more time for you. By the end of the 90s, Nas's mystique had gone downhill after a few bad creative choices. Some were out of his control, some were in his control. But the legendary Nas that we knew from 1994 was long in our rear view. We kind of written him off. And even with big name artists like Jay-Z throwing barbs his way, people were kind of like, oh, Nas is done. Well, he came roaring back with Stillmatic, an album, in my opinion, that really re-elevated his game and put him back on the top of the charts. Well, not necessarily charts, but on the hearts and minds of hip-hop fans. So, with that said, is it a classic? I'm going to say yes. Yes, it is. And here's why. Because obviously it's of superior quality. I gave the thing 5 stars. But most importantly, and here's what's missed in this conversation, it was so impactful for Nas's career. Yes, if it wasn't for this album, y'all would not be using ether as a verb. That's this album. There are songs on this album, Rewind, where he told the story in reverse. One mic, when he was doing a raising and elevating of his pitch, that artists today are still stealing. There's still a bunch of great value one mics and rewinds all up and down my eardrums because of this album. Did it affect the trajectory of hip hop? Absolutely, because it took a legend who had fallen from grace a bit and put him right back up top again and gave him a lot more juice. That album was the cause of that. And I know someone will say, let me get it out the way. Someone will say, oh, this album's got Braveheart Party on it. It can't be a classic. I did not say this was a classic. This was a perfect album. I said it was a classic album. Didn't say it was a perfect album. And yes, Braveheart Party sucks. That's a dumb song that should not have been included. But as I have been saying, you can get a 5-star review from me. You can get a classic review from me and not be perfect, because there is no perfect album. So yes, that song sucks, but that has no bearing on the positive traits on this album. In my opinion, yes, Stillmatic is a classic. Some will disagree, but I don't know. Some people probably think Watch the Throne is a classic, and I think they're crazy too. Anyway, let's see what's next. Oh, look at this coinky dink. Tupac's All Eyez on Me. Now, if you're a Soul and Stereo OG, you know I have had strong feelings about our boy Tupac Shakur over the years. Not talking about Pac the man, I'm talking about Pac the artist. And I still think some of y'all's claims that this man is the Black Jesus of hip hop is way overblown. Way overblown. But I will also say that he is by far the most influential artist in hip hop history. That can't be debated. However, it's just a good coincidence because I just reviewed over on soulandstereo.com. Go check that out after you watch this video, but only after you watch this video. Finish this video first. After you watch this video, go check out my ranking. I ranked his entire discography. Yes, even the posthumous albums. Y'all need to give me a very, very, very good Christmas gift, and a Father's Day gift, and a Valentine's Day gift, and a plate for Thanksgiving. Ugh, so many albums. Anyway, so All Eyez on Me, as we know, is probably Pac's most definitive album. When you think of Pac, this is the album you think of. It's the one that even had a movie named after it. But is it a classic? Yes. Yes, I will say it's a classic. Is it perfect? No. I don't even have this ranked in the top 2 of Pac albums. Sorry to spoil it, but still go check out that post that I talked about. Because look at what this album has done. As I said, it's a definitive Pac album. It is the album that's just filled with hit after hit after hit. It is albums, it is songs that have been sampled just all over the place. And it is an album that, again, changed the trajectory of hip hop because it was the last album we got before we lost Pac. And we got many albums after, but this was the last one we got after. So, no question, this album has its place cemented in hip hop history. And for that reason, and it's a good album, it's absolutely a hip hop classic. So, let's see what we got next up in the old helmet of doom. Weezy F Baby, please say the baby. It's the Carter 2. I remember all the hype over Wayne in the mid 2000s, and I'll be honest, I wasn't on board because I only knew Wayne as the wobbly, the weirdo hype man from the early Cash Money records, and I heard his solo stuff, and it was fine. But there was just this upswell of support that was just like, this dude is the greatest rapper alive. I'm like, really? The greatest rapper alive? Who else is great? Fabulous, the greatest rapper alive now? Like, what are we talking about? Y'all just calling anybody the greatest rapper alive? No, but the point is, by this era, he had really raised his game. And I was kind of slow to the party. So when I heard Carter 2, I was quite impressed. Quite impressed indeed. But impressed doesn't mean classic. So I asked the question, is it a classic? Yeah, I think so. Yes, and let's call this one a classic. Here's why. The album's great. It was an influential album for Wayne's career, without question. This album, in my opinion, some people call it the Carter 1 was his ascent, but to me, the Carter 2 is we show that wasn't a fluke. He was here to stay as an artist. And for sure, it changed the trajectory of hip-hop because it's helped him on his reign of dominance that carried on into the late 2000s, into the 2010s. And he's the reason we got all these weirdo coding fiend rappers all over our radio now. They're all Lil Wayne's disgusting little stepchildren. And it all started here. It would continue into Carter 3 and 4, but this is where it started. Now, I hope somebody put some other Carter albums in here because some of my other opinions, I'm sure, will break the internet. But for now, Carter 2, a classic for sure. Let's see who we got next. Let me shake this thing up since we were getting all these noises on top of each other. Go, shorty. It's your birthday. It's 50 Cent. '50s Get Rich or Die Tryin'. I guess I should say that over. Get Rich or Die Tryin' to say the right album title. Good Lord. Leave me alone. Anyway, so this album, in my opinion, was a little bit like Carter 2. I liked 50 as an artist in the early 2000s, but I just didn't really get the big hype because I wasn't a big fan of his radio songs. Like, they were okay, but people were just going insane over, like, in the club. Like, it's alright. So I heard this album much, much later than most did. It was probably a year later before I checked this album out. And I was very, very impressed. This album was absolutely as good as its reputation. And it put 50 on another level and elevated him to one of the best of that era. But is it a classic? Yep, I will call this one a classic. Because, remember, y'all know the score by now. It's a great album, a very good album, by far his best album. I think some of the mixtapes might be better. If we're counting Power of a Dollar and that stuff, that might be a little bit better. But for the studio albums official, I think this is his best album. Also, we're talking about legacy of the actual album itself. It has a pretty good legacy. It's got some pretty good classic songs, and it is the album that made 50 50. And of course, the trajectory of hip-hop did change because G-Unit became almost a household name. It was G-Unit mania. Remember he had y'all wearing them goofy-looking tank tops? Look like brassiere tops. Don't get mad at me. Cameron called them brassiere tops. Don't get mad at me, 50. You can troll me another time. But no question, This is the biggest album, one of the biggest albums of the 2000s, and absolutely had the legacy. So whereas I personally believe that, for instance, Food and Liquor is a way better album in terms of quality, it just didn't have the legacy and the impact on the culture that Get Rich or Die Tryin did. You can tell I'm still hurting over that Food and Liquor discussion. It hurts to be so unbiased. Yeah. Let's do one more because I'm getting sad. Just one more. Oh, this is an interesting one. Jay-Z, American Gangster. American Gangster, in my opinion, was Jay-Z's most underrated album. That was until I started paying attention to Twitter. And then I heard that all of y'all hate Volume 2. Like, what? Like, I never knew that there was this pushback against Jay's Volume 2. I thought we as a family, as a consensus, knew that that was one of his best albums, because it is. Anyway, we're here to talk about American Gangster. Maybe it'll have Volume 2 in here later. But American Gangster was so great to me as an OG Jay-Z fan. I was obsessed with Reasonable Doubt when it came out because this was a throwback to that time. It didn't feel old, but it felt like he took all of that energy from that era and brought it into the late 2000s and was able to recapture that at a time where we thought that that era of Jay-Z was long gone. It was dark, it was soulful, but it was poignant, and he was telling very important stories that weren't just drugs for the gratification of drugs and selling. If you listen to what he's actually saying, there's an underlying story along all these songs. It was absolutely well done and a great album. But is it a classic? No, I would probably say it's not a classic. Unfortunately, it has, think of it as we discussed with Watch the Throne. This is a great album. I feel like this was a love letter almost to the OG Jay-Z fans, to those who missed the original sound, and he was like, I got something for y'all. And he did it so well. But in the grand scheme of Jay's career, what does it really do? If we take American Gangster away from his career, we take it out of the existence of hip-hop, does the game change? Not really. It doesn't have the impact that a Reasonable Doubt or a Black Album or Blueprint have as far as his trajectory. Even 444, which I know was in here somewhere, we didn't get to it, is an album that really changed the trajectory of Jay's career. But this one didn't really. It felt more like a dessert item. When you go to the restaurant and you like, oh, you get a banging dessert, and that thing was banging, but your meal was already dope. This was just icing on the cake. This is icing on the cake and a kind of a luscious cupcake for us Jay-Z fans who really missed the original sound. So even though I love it and many Jay-Z fans love it, I don't know if I can call it a classic. It's just a really good album at a really good time where we really needed to be reminded that Jay is one of the best. I would like an American Gangster Part 2. Probably not going to be a classic though. Sorry. Well, players, as you can see, there are a whole bunch more names in here. I didn't get to them. It's getting late. Your boy got stuff to do. I know you got stuff to do. So we might revisit this next time. We'll do some more hip-hop classics. And R&B fans, I hear you before you tear me up. Yes, we will do an R&B version of Is It a Classic? We'll be doing that too soon, but we'll give it some time. We'll check that out. We'll see how this video do. And on that note, it's your turn to run in the comments and yell and talk about how dumb I was. So, do you agree with my designations? Are there albums that I thought weren't classics that you think are? Let us know, Lupe fans. Call me all types of names. I would probably agree, but I gotta be honest. And make sure you can drop some of the other albums in there as well in those comments. So if I revisit, I can add it to the old Jason Todd helmet. But in the meantime, this edition of the Soul and Stereo Sessions is a wrap. Play on, players.